Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're venturing into some really fascinating, maybe even strange territory.
Hmm.
We're exploring this idea that humanity might be influenced, maybe even manipulated by, well, energies and perhaps beings beyond our usual perception.
Yeah, and we're drawing this from a discussion featuring a quantum energy healer, Chris Fabish, on a show called Journey into the Light.
Right. We've got the audio from that discussion,
Mm.
and our plan here is to unpack these, frankly, pretty wild concepts.
Concepts like multidimensional beings, energetic interference, that kind of thing.
Exactly. We want to really try and get to grips with what this perspective is offering. Okay, let's dive in.
So what jumps out right away is just the sheer scope of these ideas.
Mm.
We're talking life beyond Earth, but also how that might directly connect to us, to our personal energy, our well-being,
Yeah, and the discussion kicks off with a point that's hard to argue with, really.
the vastness of space.
Exactly. The number of stars, galaxies, and now we're finding exoplanets all the time.
Hmm. Planets in habitable zones, places where water could potentially form, hydrogen plus oxygen,
So the odds of life existing elsewhere, they seem pretty high, don't they?
incredibly high,
Yeah.
statistically speaking, which sets the stage for the next idea. Maybe some of that life is way more advanced than us.
Which is where it starts getting really interesting regarding, well, us, humanity.
Right. The source material describes us as currently being in fourth dimensional state of consciousness.
Having moved up from 3D, apparently.
Yeah, supposedly from 3D, and now on a path towards 5D and even higher through this process they call ascension.
Okay, so when they say dimensions here, we need to be clear.
Absolutely. It doesn't seem to mean the spatial dimensions like length, width, height that physics talks about.
It's more like levels, states of being.
Kind of like states of consciousness or maybe energetic vibration levels. Think of it less like physically moving somewhere else.
And more like tuning a radio, tuning into a different frequency.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. So the shift from 3D to 4D implies, a change in perception, how we interact with reality.
And ascension means that evolution continues,
Precisely. Further development of awareness.
which then leads to this other kind of sci-fi sounding concept.
The humanoid template.
Yeah, this idea that there's a common sort of blueprint for humanoid species in our galaxy,
Apparently often involving arms and legs, like us.
but with variations,
So-
especially the head design. They mention things like bird-like heads, reptilian, feline.
Even insectoid features, like a praying mantis look.
Mm.
It's quite the visual.
It really is. Makes you wonder.
Well, yeah. I mean, current science is looking for any sign of life, microbial or whatever.
Right.
This perspective suggests, at least for some ETs, a kind of shared basic body plan, maybe with different evolutionary twists.
Okay, so hold that thought,
Uh-huh.
because the discussion then connects this to our own history.
Ah, the ancient civilizations link.
Exactly. Mayans, Egyptians, Greeks, all their depictions of gods who came from the stars. And these gods are often shown with those features we just mentioned, Horus with the bird head, Osiris with that elongated skull.
And described as giants, too, right?
Yeah, like 10, 12 feet tall, sometimes even more, and possessing knowledge that seems way beyond what those cultures should have had.
So this is offered up as a possible explanation for, say, how the pyramids were built.
Right. That these weren't just gods in a mythological sense, but actual visitors.
It's that ancient astronaut theory, but woven into this specific narrative about different ET forms and their advanced tech or knowledge.
Mm.
It definitely makes you look at those ancient mysteries differently.
So, okay, if they were around then, maybe helping build pyramids and stuff, why aren't they, parked over Times Square now?
Well, the explanation given involves what's called the cosmic law of free will,
Free will, meaning.
meaning they supposedly can't just openly interfere with our development as a civilization.
Yeah.
They have to respect our choices, our path.
So they have to be subtle, disguised.
That's the idea. Which is why their presence might have been interpreted as gods, with abilities that seemed supernatural back then.
Okay, a universal non-interference policy, basically.
Sort of, yeah. It's a common theme in a lot of these discussions.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean no interaction, just veiled interaction.
But it sounds like not all potential visitors are playing by benevolent rules, according to this source.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
The discussion brings up negative influences, specifically mentioning reptilians and certain insectoid groups,
And what are they supposedly doing?
actively manipulating human energy, trying to keep our collective vibration low.
Low vibration, meaning keeping us stuck in those lower dimensions, like 1D, 2D, 3D.
Exactly. Keeping us dense, energetically speaking. And apparently for their own benefit.
Which introduces a much a darker side to this whole picture.
It really does. Different factions, different agendas. It adds this layer of cosmic conflict almost. And the manipulation is described as being energetic, subtle.
And this links directly to our emotions, right? These lower dimensions, 1D and 2D.
Yeah, they're associated with experiencing things like greed, fear, anxiety, depression, lust, those heavier negative emotions.
And the idea is that being stuck in those emotions actually holds us back, limits our potential, even our brain capacity.
That's the claim. It suggests our emotional state isn't just personal, it has dimensional implications. Negative emotions act like an anchor, preventing that ascension.
Which leads to this word, loosh.
Loosh, right.
These negative entities are said to feed on this low vibrational energy.
Essentially, yes. Loosh is framed as the energetic byproduct of our negative emotions, like an energy food source for them.
Wow. So our fear or anger isn't just an internal state, it's potentially being harvested?
That's the concept presented. And energy healers like Chris Fabish claim they work to clear this kind of energy from people to stop that feeding, essentially.
Okay. And this isn't just personal, is it? The source suggests broader control mechanisms.
Yeah, it points to things like the news media, for example.
Also,
The tendency, especially at the start of news broadcasts, to focus on fear-inducing stories. The idea is that this could be, maybe deliberately or maybe just consequentially, a tool to keep the population's overall vibration low.
maintaining that state of fear or anxiety on a mass scale.
Exactly. And this control, according to the discussion, isn't just governments or politicians. It goes higher.
To central banks.
Central banks, and then ultimately, perhaps, to these non-human influences, these extraterrestrial or other entities. It's a very layered view of control.
A kind of hierarchy of influence operating behind the scenes.
That's the picture painted, yes.
Oh.
Suggesting societal structures might be part of maintaining a certain energetic frequency.
So given all that, what does someone like Chris Fabish at Truly Holistic actually do about it? What are the practices?
Okay, so they mentioned several specific things they address. One is dimensions.
Right, we talked about 4D, 5D.
Yeah, they assess where a person is, dimensionally speaking, and work to elevate that state, aiming for 4D, 5D. They even mention a newly accessible 7D.
Seventh dimension, okay.
Yeah.
And the goal is?
Enhancing the body's own healing capabilities. The idea is higher dimension equals better self-healing potential.
Makes sense within that framework. What else?
They talk about negative realms.
Realms like?
Things explicitly called the Satan realm, Hell realm, Demon realm, Archon realm, Reptilian realm.
Wow, okay. And the idea is we can be connected to these.
Energetically connected, yes.
Yeah.
And these connections keep you in fear. So the practice involves identifying these connections and shifting the person to what they call a love and light realm.
Counteracting the fear base.
Exactly. Then there's the concept of portals, wormholes, doors, stargates.
Energetic openings.
Yeah, access points that negative entities might use to sort of plug in.
Plug in to do what?
Siphon energy, apparently. Or interfere with our DNA or energy fields. This is linked to things like chronic fatigue.
So part of the healing is finding and closing these energetic doors.
That's the idea, protecting your energetic boundaries.
Okay. And there was something specific about Orion.
Ah, yes, the Orion connection. This involves identifying if someone is energetically linked to the Orion constellation.
Why Orion?
Because it's considered the home of the Draco, a specific reptilian race mentioned frequently in these circles.
And they're seen as major manipulators?
Yes, supposedly manipulating humanity for a very long time, specifically to prevent our ascension, that shift to higher consciousness.
So the practice is to disconnect that link.
Exactly. The source material actually compares it to Neo unplugging from the Matrix.
That's a powerful image, severing the connection to the control system.
It really conveys that sense of liberation from a hidden influence.
They also mentioned AI, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, which brings it right up to the modern day. There's a concern voiced about AI's potential negative impact.
Like rogue AI, Skynet.
Not necessarily Skynet, but drawing parallels to speculative ideas about other advanced civilizations maybe being destroyed or undone by their own AI.
So they see AI as another potential vector for negative influence.
It seems so, and therefore something to address energetically in individuals as well.
Okay, and what about abduction experiences? Time interruption, they called it.
Right. It's framed not just as physical kidnapping, which is the common idea.
But as energetic manipulation, too.
Yeah, affecting the energy body, the DNA, even the physical body on subtle levels, sometimes manifesting as experiences people can't explain, like feeling violated without physical cause.
So it broadens the definition of abduction quite significantly.
It does suggest intrusions can happen on levels we aren't consciously aware of in the moment.
And finally, there was mention of specific entities, archons.
Archons, demons, jinn. These are described as being particularly nasty and difficult to remove.
Requiring special techniques.
Apparently, yes. Sometimes needing what's called the torus vortex energy, or a specific geometry to dislodge them.
And the speaker linked these to serious issues.
Yeah, there was an anecdote shared about a recent case where archons were believed to be contributing to a patient's cancer.
Wow. That really underscores how serious these energetic attachments are considered within this framework.
Absolutely. It frames them not just as minor annoyances, but as potentially having profound impacts on health.
Now, just for context, did the speaker mention where these ideas come from, their sources?
He did mention a few. Gav.com, specifically a show called Cosmic Disclosure with Corey Good.
Okay, I've heard of that. Secret space program stuff.
Yeah, that and discussions around the law of one material. Also mentioned were David Wilcock and his wisdom teachings.
He talks a lot about ancient mysteries and ETs too, right?
Mm-hmm. And David Icke, who is probably best known for his theories about reptilians.
Right. So these are definitely figures and sources deep within that alternative research community.
Absolutely. And, as with any information, especially in these more fringe areas, it's always important for listeners to approach it with their own discernment.
Good point. Always critical thinking. Did they try to demonstrate any of this energetically during the talk?
They did, actually. There were a few intention-based exercises guided for the listeners.
Like what?
One was called a neutralization ring, visualizing a ring under your feet,
Yeah.
pulling out negative energy.
Yeah.
Some people might feel sensations, like being pushed or heavy legs.
Okay. Intention-based visualization.
Another was the Visa Pisces tool, intended to help reconnect the soul with the physical body. Again, potentially creating a felt sensation.
Right.
And the torus vortex energy we mentioned earlier, that was used in an intention exercise specifically aimed at removing archons and something called false center ether.
So trying to give listeners a direct, albeit subjective, taste of these energies.
Exactly, making the concepts a bit more experiential.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. Key takeaways from this deep dive.
Well, we've certainly explored some pretty mind-bending ideas. Energetic manipulation, multidimensional beings, hidden influences.
All through the lens of this quantum energy healing perspective.
Yeah. And concepts like low vibrational energy, loosh, energetic attachments, portals, the Orion connection.
And the idea of both positive and negative ET interactions, it definitely offers a very, very different way of looking at well-being and our place in the cosmos, really.
It really does. If you step back, regardless of whether you buy into every specific detail,
Right.
it pushes you to think about the nature of reality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the possibility of forces or influences maybe operating beyond what our current science readily explains.
It undeniably encourages a kind of openness, maybe,
Yeah.
to the sheer weirdness and mystery of existence.
Yeah, and the potential complexity of how we might fit into a much larger cosmic picture.
So it really leaves you wondering, considering how vast everything is and the genuine possibility of life we can't even conceive of, how could we become more aware of subtle things that might be nudging our thoughts, our feelings, one way or another?
That's a great question.
Could there be insights hidden in these unconventional ideas, even if we don't take them literally? Insights into our own challenges, maybe, or our connection to something bigger.
It certainly invites cultivating curiosity, I think. Questioning assumptions about how things work, both internally and externally. Exploring different viewpoints, even way out there ones.
Sometimes that can spark new thoughts, right? Even if you end up back at a more conventional place, you might see it differently.
Exactly. It's about the process of inquiry.
So for any of you listening whose curiosity has been sparked by this, who maybe want to explore these themes more.
Well, you could look into energy healing concepts generally, ideas about multidimensionality.
Or even check out some of the sources mentioned, like the law of one material, or the work of Wilcock or Icke.
But, as we said, always approach that kind of material with a critical, discerning mind. Navigate it thoughtfully.
Absolutely. It's fascinating stuff, but definitely requires your own judgment. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.